The bus ride into Charlotte had been long and stiff. Delilah Hayes sat by the window, watching unfamiliar highways blur past, with nothing but a small tote bag in her lap and knots in her shoulders. Her roommate bailed on the trip last night, some excuse about a last-minute family emergency. Delilah should have cancelled too. But the conference wasn't just another event. It was a chance to network, learn, and maybe plant a seed for her future. She stepped off at the downtown stop around 9 p.m., her legs heavy and eyelids heavier. She caught a rideshare to the motel she'd booked weeks ago, the cheapest one still near the city. The neon Welcome Travelers sign buzzed above the rusted roofline. The man at the front desk gave her an uneasy look as he typed something into his computer. "Miss Hayes, right?" he asked. Delilah nodded, brushing curls from her forehead. "Yep. Reservation under Delilah Hayes. 2 nights." He paused, squinting at the screen, then exhaled through his nose. "So, small issue. It looks like your room was double booked." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "Well," he scratched his temple, "we only have 1 room left. The gentleman in there is willing to share. For tonight only. Separate beds." He said it's no big deal, but... Delilah stared at him. "You serious?" "I swear this never happens," he said quickly, waving his hands. He's quiet, professional. "I promise, if you're uncomfortable, I can call another place, but they're all..." She sighed. "Booked." "Yeah, I figured." She checked her phone. Nearly 10. She hadn't eaten since lunch. Her back throbbed. She just wanted sleep. "Fine," she said, grabbing the key. "Separate sides. 1 night." The clerk's shoulders dropped in relief. "Thank you. Room 214, 2nd floor." She climbed the stairs slowly, her suitcase wheels thudding behind her. She paused outside the room and knocked twice. A moment passed. Then the door opened. He was tall, over 6 feet, and stood barefoot in dark slacks and a white undershirt. His hair was neatly cropped, his posture straight. He looked like he didn't belong anywhere near a budget motel. Yet here he was. "Delilah?" he asked, voice deep but even. She nodded, eyes briefly scanning the room behind him. 1 bed. Couch by the window. It looked clean enough. "I told the guy downstairs I didn't mind," he said. "If you want the couch, it pulls out." She shrugged, wheeling in her bag. "You look like you've got chiropractor money. I'll take the bed." A short laugh escaped him. She tossed her bag near the corner, kicked off her shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her feet were killing her. "You here for the conference?" he asked, as he returned to his side of the room. "Yeah, you?" He nodded, placing a tablet on the desk. "Finance track." Delilah blinked. Yikes. "I'm with the social non-profit panels. I work with mothers trying to escape cycles of poverty." He turned slightly, studying her. "That's important work." She smiled tiredly. "It is. Doesn't pay much, but it matters." There was a quiet pause. "I'm Maddox," he said. She tilted her head. "Just Maddox?" "Lane," he said after a second. "Maddox Lane." It didn't hit her then. Not fully. That name. She'd heard it before but couldn't place it. "You want food?" he asked suddenly, pulling out a takeout menu from the nightstand. "I was about to order." Her stomach growled before she could answer. She nodded. "Sure. Nothing spicy." The Chinese food came 20 minutes later. They sat cross-legged on opposite ends of the bed, boxes between them. He used chopsticks like a pro. She stabbed lo mein with a plastic fork. "So," he said mid-bite, "what made you want to help single moms?" She hesitated. "I watched mine cry over bills more nights than I can count. She worked 3 jobs, barely made rent. I told myself, if I could ever help someone like her, I would..." He looked at her, quiet again. "You're not like most people I meet at these events." "Let me guess," she said, sipping water. "They talk in numbers and nod at each other's watches." "Something like that," he said, grinning. She let herself laugh. It felt good. "Okay," she said, putting down her container. "What about you? You rich and bored?" "Close," he replied. Started a financial firm in New York. Sold it. Now I run a private equity group. Delilah squinted at him. So, you tell rich people what to do with their money? Basically, must be nice. He didn't respond right away. Then he said, success comes with a cost. Sometimes, a quiet one. She didn't push further, but his tone lingered. They turned off the lights around midnight. She took the bed. He laid down on the couch. Silence filled the space between them. Not awkward, just full. At 3 a.m., she rolled over, half asleep. He did too. Their eyes met in the dim glow from the street lamp outside. They didn't speak, just looked. She should have pulled away, but she didn't. He sat up slightly. She shifted closer. One slow movement. One soft kiss, no words. And just like that, the air changed. But they didn't go further. They didn't strip off clothes or make wild promises. They just kissed. Longer this time. Her heart raced, but not from fear. It was the kind of kiss that told her, I see you. It lasted a minute, maybe two. Then she turned over, heart pounding, and closed her eyes. He didn't say a word. Neither did she. The next time she opened her eyes, sunlight spilled through the blinds. And he was gone. The couch was empty. His shoes, tablet and jacket, gone too. But on the nightstand sat a folded note. She reached for it, hands a little shaky. Thank you for the honesty, ML. That was it. No number, no goodbye, no trace. Delilah sat still for a long moment. Then she exhaled through her nose, folded the note in half, and slipped it into her journal. She got up, got dressed, and packed her things. There was no point lingering. After all, it was just one night, wasn't it? Delilah checked out of the motel quietly. The front desk clerk gave her a polite nod, not mentioning anything about the room-sharing arrangement. She didn't need the awkwardness. What happened last night already felt like a blur, like something that belonged to someone else. She slid into the back seat of a rideshare, headed toward the conference center. She still had 2 days of panels, workshops, and handshakes ahead. She forced herself into the rhythm, clip her badge on, smile, take notes, pretend like nothing was different. But everything felt different. Every now and then, her mind drifted back to that hotel room, to the soft tone of Maddox's voice. To that moment, their eyes met, and they didn't need to say anything. She shook the thoughts off like cold rain. By the end of day 2, her notebook was full, her legs sore, and her mind exhausted. She caught the evening bus back to Raleigh, leaning against the window the whole way home. The city lights passed by quietly, and she told herself she'd let it go. It was just one night, one kiss, one stranger. Back in her apartment, things returned to normal. She worked the cafe mornings and the non-profit in the afternoons. Bills still came. Rent was still due. Life didn't stop to ask if you were feeling off. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. She noticed the first sign during a shift at the cafe. The smell of brewed espresso, normally comforting, made her stomach turn. She barely made it to the back before losing her lunch in the staff restroom. The next morning, she chalked it up to bad takeout. But the day after that, it happened again, then again. By week 4, her body no longer let her pretend. At the pharmacy counter, she avoided eye contact as she slid 2 boxes across the counter. The cashier barely blinked. Bag or no bag? No bag. Back home, she paced her small bathroom with trembling fingers. The first test took minutes. The second, seconds. Both said the same thing. Pregnant. Her hands went cold. She sat on the toilet lid, elbows on her knees, staring into nothing. The air felt thin. She thought about that night, about Maddox Lane. There was no one else. No maybe, no uncertainty. It was his. Her stomach twisted, not from nausea this time, but from everything else. Fear, confusion, disbelief. There was no plan for this. She was 26, still taking community college night classes, still sharing rent with a roommate who'd just given her 30 days notice because she was moving in with her boyfriend. Delilah didn't cry. She didn't have time to cry. Instead, she stood, opened the mirror cabinet, and pulled down the bottle. Of folic acid she kept from a community class on women's health. She stared at the label, then opened it. 3 days later, she sat in the corner of the small clinic on Martin Street, arms crossed tight over her chest. The nurse came in with a warm smile. "We confirmed the results, Miss Hayes. You're about 7 weeks along. The baby looks healthy." Delilah nodded, swallowing hard. "Any plans on contacting the father?" "No," she said quickly. It wasn't serious." The nurse didn't press. "Well, you're strong. We'll get you set up with a prenatal schedule, nutrition plan, and resource guide." "Thanks." When she stepped outside, the air felt louder, sharper. She sat on the steps, hands folded over her belly. This was real. There was a child growing inside her, and she was going to raise it, alone. The next few weeks were survival. She cut back her cafe hours. Her boss at the non-profit, Miss Clarice, noticed something different. "You look tired, sugar." Delilah smiled, weakly. "Just catching up on life." Clarice watched her carefully. "If you ever need anything, I'm here." "I've walked that road before." Delilah nodded, appreciating it more than she could say. She rented baby books from the library, watched YouTube videos on budgeting for single moms. She made lists, then crossed things out, then rewrote them again. She didn't think about Maddox, not out of anger, but because she didn't have the space to wonder about someone who had made no effort to stay. He hadn't left a phone number, an email, nothing, just a name and a note. "Thank you for the honesty." Honesty. She scoffed once while washing dishes. What did that even mean? Did he write that note in gratitude or in guilt? Was it a compliment? A goodbye? It didn't matter now. What mattered was staying healthy, saving money, finding a new roommate or a new apartment altogether. What mattered was this baby, and making sure they were okay. One night, she stood in front of her bedroom mirror, lifting her shirt slightly. Her belly had just started to round, barely, but it was there. She placed her hand gently over it. "Hey, little one," she whispered. No one else had to know the story behind the bump. It would just be hers. No fairy tale, no chase, no headlines, just one woman, and the strength she hadn't known she had. Delilah moved with quiet purpose. At work, she stayed focused. She memorized orders at the cafe, stacked invoices at the non-profit, and took late-night walks to ease her back pain. Her life became routine, scheduled, minimal, and controlled. She didn't talk about the pregnancy. She wasn't hiding it from shame. She just didn't have the energy to explain a story that wasn't finished. Some women talked about baby names, nursery colors, and family reactions. Delilah talked to herself, to her reflection in the mirror, to the baby when no one else was listening. Her body started shifting. Her ankles swelled. Her moods shifted. And still, she pressed on. By the time her second trimester began, she had changed jobs at the cafe. Less standing, more desk work. Clarice, her non-profit supervisor, gave her shorter shifts without asking questions. She was grateful for the kindness, but still kept her story to herself. The last thing she needed was pity. One evening, while doing paperwork in the non-profit's back office, Clarice leaned against the doorframe. "You're doing okay?" she asked gently. Delilah nodded. "Yeah, just pacing myself." Clarice tilted her head. "I only ask because I've seen that look before." Delilah glanced up. "The one that says, 'I'm fine, even when you're drowning.'" Delilah let out a slow breath. "It's been a lot." Clarice stepped inside, closed the door. "You got someone? Family? Support?" Delilah hesitated. "Not much. My mom passed 3 years ago. Dad was never in the picture. I've got me." Clarice sat beside her. "You've got more than you think. And you've got me now, too." Delilah didn't say anything. She just nodded, grateful and a little scared of what gratitude could grow into. That weekend, she had her first scare. She was walking to the bus stop after work when a sharp cramp hit her side. She froze, holding a parking meter to steady herself. A woman across the street saw her struggling and called out, "You okay?" Delilah waved her off and sat down slowly on a bench. The pain passed in a minute, but it lingered long enough to shake her. She made an appointment the next morning. The clinic ran some tests. The nurse came in, smiling. "Nothing serious. Your body's just telling you to slow down. You're carrying low, it's normal, but listen to the signals. Stress can work against you." Delilah left with two things: a prescription for iron supplements and a warning to take care of herself better. It was easier said than done. The next few days, Delilah allowed herself more rest. She drank more water. She journaled at night and tried to find peace in small routines: folding clothes, cooking rice, lighting a cheap lavender candle by the window. But something still lingered in the back of her mind. A name: Maddox Lane. She hadn't Googled him. She didn't want to, but every time she passed a finance article, or heard someone say private equity, or spotted a watch like the one he wore that night, her stomach tightened, not with longing, but with unfinished questions. What would he say if he saw her now? Would he care? Would he even remember? One Saturday morning, she sat on her apartment floor sorting bills when a knock came at the door. It was her roommate's cousin, Jessa. She was the new tenant coming in next week. Tall, loud, and curious. "Oh my God, are you expecting?" she said immediately, pointing at Delilah's belly. Delilah nodded, uncomfortable. "Dope. Babies are cute when they're not yours." Jessa laughed and walked inside with a box. "Is the dad around?" Delilah didn't answer. Jessa looked back. "Oh, got it. No judgment. Just asking." Delilah stayed quiet. Later that night, alone again, she stood at the sink rinsing plates and whispered to herself, even if he were around, what difference would it make? By month 5, the bump was undeniable. Delilah had outgrown half her clothes. She started picking up shifts at a second-hand maternity shop a few blocks from her place in exchange for store credit. The owner liked her and offered flexible hours. It helped. Slowly, she was building something. Still alone, still quiet, but not helpless. Then one afternoon, while standing in line at the pharmacy, she glanced up at the wall-mounted TV playing the local business news, and froze. The banner read, "Billionaire Maddox Lane announces new youth investment center in Raleigh." Her throat went dry. There he was, on screen, still sharp, still polished, standing beside city officials and press microphones. "We're here to create long-term opportunity for underserved communities," he said on the screen. "This is personal for me." Delilah gripped the shelf beside her. The baby moved slightly. He was in Raleigh. Not New York, not Los Angeles. Here, in her city. She couldn't breathe. She left the pharmacy without her vitamins. She walked 6 blocks home. She didn't speak to anyone that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the television frozen in her head. Maddox Lane. Here. The man who kissed her once disappeared and left a note with no way back. The man whose child grew inside her. Her walls shook that night, but they didn't fall. She still didn't know what she would do, but she knew this. Her quiet life was no longer untouched. The past had found its way home. Delilah didn't sleep that night. She kept replaying the news clip in her head. Maddox in a charcoal grey suit, answering questions like a man used to being listened to. Poised, charismatic. He hadn't changed, not from what she could tell. But now he was on her turf, not just passing through. Raleigh wasn't a stopover anymore. It was his new focus. That changed things. For the first time since that night in Charlotte, Delilah didn't feel safe inside the bubble she'd built. Until now, she'd chosen not to search him online. She didn't want to see tabloids or lists of women photographed beside him. She didn't want to feed her curiosity. But tonight, she broke her rule. She opened her laptop and typed, "Maddox Lane Raleigh." Dozens of articles appeared. Billionaire to launch local investment incubator. Lane Financial Group expands footprint to NC youth. Focused development project expected to create 500 jobs. Then a headline she hadn't expected. Non-profit partnership gala. Lane hosts exclusive event to bridge business and community. Her stomach twisted. The logo beside the article was familiar. It was her non-profit. Clarice's organization. The gala was next weekend at the Glenview Hotel downtown. Delilah clicked the link. Her eyes scanned the list of invitees. Corporate heads, local leaders, community figures, staff members, and then team members from Helping Hands Raleigh. Her name would be there. Clarice had likely submitted the RSVP list already. She closed the laptop slowly and sat in the dark. He would see her. Or worse, he wouldn't. Delilah debated skipping the gala. She could claim she wasn't feeling well, ask to stay behind and work logistics from the office. But Clarice would question it, and deep down, she knew hiding wasn't the answer. If fate had dragged Maddox into her orbit again, maybe it was for a reason. But she needed control. On her terms. Not like that hotel room. Not like that goodbye note. The morning of the gala, Clarice handed her a black garment bag. "Picked this up for you yesterday." Delilah blinked. "You didn't have to." "I did," Clarice said firmly. "You've been carrying a lot. Let someone carry you for once." Delilah smiled, her throat tight. "Thank you." When she got home, she opened the bag and found a knee-length wrap dress in soft emerald green, simple and elegant. It wasn't designer, but it felt like dignity, like she belonged. She pulled her hair into a low bun, added small earrings, and applied the lightest touch of lip gloss. When she stepped back and looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. She didn't look scared. She looked ready. The Glenview Hotel shimmered with warm light and high ceilings. Crystal glasses clinked. Servers in tuxedos carried trays of tiny bites. A jazz quartet played near the ballroom entrance. Delilah stepped in, her heels clicking softly on the polished floors. She saw Clarice near the non-profit table, speaking with a group of donors. Delilah nodded and kept walking, slowly scanning the room. She spotted Maddox almost immediately. He stood near the front of the room, speaking to a tall man in a pinstripe suit. His posture was relaxed, but his hands moved with purpose. He wore the same confidence she remembered. Not loud, but undeniable. Delilah stepped toward the back wall and took a breath. She wasn't going to hide, but she wasn't going to chase him either. If fate wanted them to meet again, it would happen. It didn't take long. A man from the city's planning board introduced himself to her, shaking her hand and thanking her for the non-profit's work. As they spoke, Delilah felt someone step closer behind her. A low voice followed. "Delilah Hayes." She turned. Maddox stood there, closer than she expected, taller than she remembered. His gaze swept over her once, not inappropriately, but with the sharpness of someone who saw every detail. His eyes finally landed on her stomach, now visible under the soft fabric of the green dress. Everything stopped. The music, the noise, the wine glasses, the strangers, just her and him, face to face. For the first time since Charlotte. "You never called," he said. Delilah held his gaze. "You never left a number." His jaw flexed. "I figured if you needed anything, you'd reach out." "You figured wrong." He blinked. The silence between them thickened. His eyes dropped again to her belly, then back up. "Mine?" She didn't flinch. Yes. There was no drama in her voice, no shame, just truth. Maddox didn't speak for a moment. His face held still, but something flickered, shock maybe, or recognition. She thought he might turn and walk away. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Can we talk?" "Not here." Delilah nodded once. They moved to the garden patio outside the ballroom. The soft glow of string lights lined the railing. Distant laughter echoed from the inside, but out here, the air was different, real. Maddox leaned against the stone wall, folding his arms. "Why didn't you try to find me?" Delilah crossed hers. Would it have mattered? "I don't run from my responsibilities." She raised a brow. "You sure? You vanished before the sun came up." He didn't argue that. "I didn't know," he said quietly. I had no idea. Delilah nodded. I figured that much. You should have told me. I shouldn't have had to. Her voice didn't rise, but it didn't waver either. They stared at each other, tension wrapped around them like thread, but beneath it, something else. A pause. Maddox broke the silence first. Is it a boy or girl? Girl. What's her name? She's not born yet. He nodded, slowly. Delilah, he said after a beat. I don't want to complicate your life, but I want to be involved. Whatever you need, support, care, anything. She narrowed her eyes. So you can write a check and sleep well at night? No, he said sharply. So, I can show up? She tilted her head. You don't even know me. He looked right at her. I spent one night thinking I never would. She walked away first. Not angry. Not overwhelmed. Just needing space. Maddox didn't follow. But as she stepped back inside the ballroom, her hands gently covering her belly, she felt something shift. It wasn't about fear anymore. It wasn't about loneliness either. It was about choice. And now that Maddox Lane knew the truth, the next chapter wouldn't be written alone. Delilah didn't sleep the night of the gala. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Maddox. Not the man in the hotel room from months ago, but the one standing under garden lights, asking about their daughter. Calm, measured, still him but different. He hadn't yelled, hadn't denied her truth. He had listened, but something about it still unsettled her. Maybe it was the quiet confidence in his eyes, the way he processed the news without reacting loudly. Or maybe it was her own instinct bracing for something to fall apart again. She'd spent too many years being her own safety net to trust someone else so easily. She sat up in bed around 3 a.m., the city lights stretching past her window, and placed her hand over her stomach. The baby shifted slightly. Delilah whispered, I don't know what he wants, but I know what we need. The next morning, she kept her routine the same. Up at 7, warm oatmeal with bananas, short walk around the block, breathing exercises she'd learned from a prenatal YouTube channel. She needed normal. When she arrived at Helping Hands, Clarice greeted her with a raised brow. So, I saw you talking to Maddox Lane. Delilah paused. Yeah. Clarice waited for more. Delilah gave none. You okay? Clarice asked. Delilah nodded. I'm fine. But she wasn't. She just didn't know how to say I told him the truth, and now I have no idea what happens next. 2 days later, the first email arrived. Subject line, thank you for not walking away. The sender, Maddox Lane. Delilah sat at the non-profit desk and stared at the screen. She read the message twice before closing it without responding. The next day, another email came. This one shorter. I'm not trying to take over, I just want to know what I've missed. Can we meet? She left it unread. She wasn't trying to punish him. She was trying to protect herself. Her boundaries weren't spite, they were survival. That weekend, she visited the used maternity store where she now worked part-time. While restocking baby onesies, she paused beside a shelf lined with parenting books. One title caught her eye. Co-parenting without the drama. She turned it over in her hands, then tucked it under her arm. When she got home that night, she sat at her kitchen table and opened it. First chapter, first line. You're not required to trust someone who hurt you, but you do owe your child the right to be known. That line stayed with her. Monday morning, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. 30 minutes later, a message appeared. Hi, I'm not calling to push. I just wanted to ask if you'd let me be part of the doctor visits. Even if you don't want to talk to me, I'd like to be there. Just quietly, respectfully. Delilah stared at the screen. It wasn't a demand. It was a request, and for some reason, that made her more anxious than if he had shown up uninvited. She didn't reply, but she didn't block him either. At her next prenatal appointment, Delilah checked in at the front desk, sat in the corner of the small waiting area, and scrolled through her phone to stay distracted. 10 minutes in, she felt the door open behind her. She didn't have to look to know it was him. She heard his voice at the counter. quiet, calm, asking if he could join her for the appointment. When the nurse nodded, she turned and locked eyes with him. Maddox didn't smile, didn't push. He simply said, "May I?" Delilah stood. "One visit." "That's it." He nodded. "Understood." Inside the room, she lay back on the crinkled exam paper. The nurse rubbed gel on her belly and positioned the monitor. The soft sound of a heartbeat filled the room. Steady, strong. Maddox sat in the corner, arms folded, expression unreadable. The nurse pointed to the screen. "That's her head, and right there, her legs." Delilah kept her eyes on the screen, not on him. But out of the corner of her vision, she saw something shift in his face. His eyes softened. His posture leaned forward. He didn't speak, but in that moment, she knew. He saw her, both of them. After the appointment, they stood by the elevator in silence. Delilah broke it first. "You looked surprised." "I was." He didn't elaborate. She didn't ask him to. They rode the elevator down together. When the doors opened, she said, "Thank you for coming." He nodded. "Thank you for letting me." Then he turned and walked toward the parking lot, not asking for more. Not yet. That night, Delilah lay on her side, her hand resting over the baby's rhythmic kicks. Maddox wasn't pretending. He wasn't rushing either. And that unsettled her even more, because if he was going to be around, she'd have to decide what that meant, not just for the baby, but for her. Delilah didn't see Maddox for 2 weeks after the appointment. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't email, and that unsettled her. She had expected him to push, to show up with offers or schedules or opinions on baby names. But instead, he gave her space. It made her suspicious and oddly thoughtful, because when people didn't rush you, you had to sit with your own feelings, and that was the part she hated, not knowing what she felt anymore. Her days rolled on. The non-profit was prepping for spring fundraisers, and her role had shifted to behind-the-scenes coordination. She was grateful. Moving too fast now made her breath short and her ankles tight. Clarice watched her carefully but didn't pry. One afternoon, as they went over budgets, Clarice finally asked, "Do you trust him?" Delilah didn't answer right away. "I trust that he won't disappear again," she said softly. "That's a start." Clarice nodded and looked down at the spreadsheet, but her next words caught Delilah off guard. "Don't spend so long being cautious that you forget to be present." Delilah looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Clarice said, "sometimes we wear armor so long, we forget how to take it off, even when no one's swinging." That night, Delilah sat on her porch with a blanket draped over her legs and a warm cup of mint tea. The sky above Raleigh was clear, a few stars scattered across the soft navy stretch. She remembered the sound of the heartbeat from the last appointment. Fast, steady, not loud, but strong, just like her, or how she used to be. She pulled out her phone. No missed messages, no emails, just quiet. And for once, the silence didn't scare her. On Friday, a package arrived at the non-profit office with her name handwritten on the label. No company, no return address. Inside was a simple hardcover notebook and a folded note tucked into the first page. "You said you journal. I figured it's time to write the chapter you didn't see coming. ML." She stared at it. No flowers, no gifts, just a journal. Delilah closed the cover and slid it into her desk drawer. She didn't throw it away, but she wasn't sure she was ready to write anything yet. The next weekend, Maddox showed up, not at her home, at Helping Hands. Clarice saw him first and raised a brow. "Guess you'll want privacy." Delilah stepped out from the back office. "You're bold." "I'm careful," Maddox said, "but I didn't come to push, just check in." She folded her arms. "Why here?" "Because this is where you are. And I'm not going to pretend like the rest of your life doesn't matter." He wasn't dressed like a billionaire today. A simple navy sweater, dark jeans, clean sneakers. He looked like a man trying to blend in, and maybe for once, that wasn't a strategy. It was sincerity. Delilah motioned toward the garden benches outside the building. They sat in silence for a few beats. Then she spoke. "You've been quiet. I didn't want to overwhelm you. You didn't—" He looked at her. She clarified, "But I still needed space." Maddox nodded. "Understood." A long pause. Then he asked, "What scares you the most about all this?" Delilah blinked. "That I'll let you in, and you'll walk away, maybe not the first time, but eventually." He didn't blink. He didn't deny it. He said, "That's fair," then added, "But I've had money for years, Delilah, and not one person in my life has ever told me I'd be a father. That kind of news doesn't make me want to run. It makes me want to do something right for once." The words weren't grand, but they hit differently. They didn't hug, didn't hold hands, didn't make promises, but when they stood, Delilah said, "My next appointment's Thursday at noon." And Maddox replied, "I'll be there." The following Thursday, he was early. He sat in the waiting room reading a brochure on safe sleeping positions. Delilah smirked when she saw him. "Studying." He held it up, trying to be useful. The appointment went well. The baby was growing at a good pace. The doctor praised Delilah for staying consistent and low stress. When they stepped out into the parking lot, Maddox offered to walk her to the corner. They stood by the bus stop, spring wind tugging gently at her coat. "Would it offend you," he asked, "if I said I wanted to help you move? I don't like the idea of you and the baby squeezing into a shared space." Delilah looked at him, unsure. "Not trying to buy anything," he added quickly, "just offering a safer place. Temporary. Your name on the lease. I'll cover the first few months until you settle." She didn't answer right away, but she said this, "If I agree, it's not about saving me. It's about showing up, daily. No grand gestures, no hero moves. I wouldn't have offered it any other way." That night, she opened the journal he'd given her. She didn't start with page 1. She flipped to the middle and wrote one sentence, "Maybe this isn't a rescue story." Then she closed it, and for the first time, let herself rest without bracing for disappointment. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your heart and letting someone try again? Drop a comment below. Your story might help someone else feel seen. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Delilah never thought she'd live in a one-bedroom apartment with central air, working plumbing, and a front door that didn't stick in the winter. But here she was. The place wasn't extravagant, but it was hers. Maddox hadn't pushed. He'd simply offered, made sure her name was the only one on the lease, and stepped back. She paid the utilities. He covered 3 months' rent, nothing more. No lectures, no pressure. She could breathe, and maybe, for the first time in a while, sleep through the night without checking over her shoulder. Moving in had taken less than a day. Maddox had quietly hired 2 movers, all coordinated through Clarice, who didn't say much but gave Delilah a nod of approval when she saw the new address on file. "You're still in control," Clarice told her as she boxed up office files. "I've seen too many women hand over the wheel just because a man's offering gas money. You haven't done that." Delilah hadn't, and she didn't plan to. She wasn't chasing a family fantasy. She was protecting her peace. Her new neighborhood sat just east of downtown, quiet, diverse, filled with families and older residents who walked their dogs at dawn. The local grocer knew her name by week 2. She found a bakery nearby that sold warm apple fritters and never judged her for ordering 2. She didn't tell many people about Maddox. Not yet. He wasn't a secret. He just wasn't part of her daily conversations. He was present, but respectful. He didn't hover. Instead, he came around once or twice a week, dropped off groceries, sat in on checkups, asked how she was sleeping. Once, he offered to assemble a crib she'd ordered online. She said no, then spent the whole afternoon swearing at screws and directions in silence until she gave up and texted, "Fine. Come help." He arrived 30 minutes later with a drill and zero smugness. That earned him a sandwich and an awkward thank you. He never pushed for more. Delilah didn't offer more. Still, the air between them felt charged, like something was waiting, but neither wanted to name it yet. At Helping Hands, Clarice pulled her into a side meeting. Maddox reached out, she said. He wants to fund a scholarship program for teen mothers. Delilah blinked. You're kidding. He's not. Clarice handed her a proposal draft. Says he wants to do it in honor of someone brave who didn't ask for praise. Delilah didn't react. Clarice raised an eyebrow. That someone's you. I figured. You okay with this? Delilah read through the outline. It was clean, thoughtful, not performative. I'm okay with it, she said. If it helps the girls. Clarice grinned. That's why you're good at this. Later that evening, Delilah sat on her small balcony with her feet in a bucket of warm water and a mug of tea on her lap. The city buzzed gently below. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maddox. Can I bring over that bookshelf you mentioned? I'm near your place. No pressure. She hesitated, then typed, Sure. Back doors unlocked. He arrived 20 minutes later. No flowers, no fuss. Just a tool bag in one hand and a flat box of wood panels in the other. They didn't talk much while he built. She watched him kneel on the floor, sleeves rolled up, hands working without instructions. He moved like someone who didn't need to explain himself, like he'd always had to fix things quietly. When he finished, she said, Thank you. He stood, wiped his palms and gave a nod. Then, for the first time in weeks, she said, Do you want to stay for dinner? They ate stir-fry at the kitchen table. No music, no clinking wine glasses, just conversation. He asked her about her classes. She asked about his center. He told her about the scholarship idea. She admitted she already knew. It was your story that sparked it, he said. But I want to make sure it's never about you publicly. That okay? Delilah nodded. That's more than okay. After dinner, he helped her clean. Quietly. No pretending they were something they weren't, but no denying the comfort either. When he reached for his jacket to leave, she asked, Do you ever think about that night? Maddox didn't flinch. Every week. She looked down. I never expected any of this. He stepped closer. Not invading, just honest. Neither did I. But I'm not running. Delilah folded her arms across her belly. I'm not chasing. He smiled faintly. Good. They stood like that for a moment. No kiss, no promises. Just something solid growing in the space between silence and trust. Delilah didn't expect Maddox to text the next morning. But he did. Thanks for dinner. I'll never forget the taste of undercooked rice and overcooked zucchini. Let's call it a masterpiece. She smirked at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard before she typed, You're welcome. I'll burn something new next week if you're lucky. He sent back a laughing emoji. Nothing more. No flirtation, no pressure. But the space between them felt lighter now. Not cleared, but no longer so dense with hesitation. She didn't want to analyze it. So, she didn't. Over the next few days, Delilah kept her focus on work and rest. The final months of pregnancy had introduced new levels of fatigue. Her body had changed. Her pace had slowed. But her head remained clear. Maddox kept his rhythm too, checking in, showing up when needed, never assuming more than she gave. One afternoon, while finalizing client files, Clarice leaned in the office doorway with 2 cups of iced tea. You know what I like about you? Clarice said. Delilah looked up, curious. What? You don't let anyone narrate your life. Not even the ones who try to save you. Delilah smiled faintly. That's because most people only want to save what makes them look good. Exactly. Clarice took a sip. But he's different. Delilah didn't reply. Clarice stepped in closer. You're allowed to let the good ones show up, Delilah. Doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you're tired of being the only one holding the roof up. That stayed with her. That Friday, Maddox picked her up from the clinic after a glucose screening. They didn't say much in the car, just exchanged updates on the doctor's feedback, and whether the air conditioner in her place still needed fixing. When they pulled up to her apartment, he asked, You need anything before I head back? She hesitated, then nodded. Can you carry this up for me? She gestured toward a small box in the back seat. baby supplies she had picked up from a community program. Maddox didn't hesitate. Of course. Upstairs, he placed the box near the closet. Before he turned to leave, he looked at her for a moment. "You're doing all this with grace." She raised a brow. "You think so?" "I know so." Her heart didn't flutter, but something in her chest settled. "You want tea?" she asked. They sat again on her balcony, the night soft and still around them. Maddox asked, "Did you always want kids?" Delilah stared at the sky. "I wasn't sure. I used to think love and children came as a package. I guess I thought I'd have the first part figured out before the second arrived." He nodded. "Same." She glanced at him. "You ever come close?" "No," he said. "Not even a little." "Why not?" He paused. "I've spent years building things that didn't feel like home. So I stopped trusting the idea of one." Her eyes softened. "Maybe home isn't a place," she said. "Maybe it's just where your peace stops running." They didn't speak for a while after that. A few days later, Clarice asked Delilah to speak briefly at the upcoming fundraiser. Just a few words about the program, its impact, and what they hope to build next. Delilah agreed. Public speaking wasn't her favorite, but she understood the importance of the ask. Donors gave when stories felt personal. On the day of the event, she wore a navy dress and flats. Nothing flashy, just honest. She stepped up to the mic and looked out over the crowd. Familiar faces, community partners, local sponsors. Then her eyes caught Maddox in the back. He wasn't in the front row. He wasn't seated at the very important person table. He stood off to the side, arms folded, eyes focused. Present, but not spotlighted. She took a breath. "I used to think non-profits were built by numbers, budgets, data, projections. But what I've learned is that they're really built by moments. Small ones. A warm coat. A ride to a shelter. A yes when someone only expects no. Those are the things that shift someone's story." She paused, then smiled slightly. "I know, because I'm living proof of that." Applause followed. Not loud, but heartfelt. Delilah stepped down and returned to her seat. Maddox never approached her during the event. But she saw his eyes, proud, steady. He didn't need to be thanked. He was just there. That evening he sent her a message. "You have no idea how powerful your voice is." That wasn't a speech. That was testimony. She replied, "Then I guess we both had something to hear." That night, she stood in her bathroom, brushing her teeth, and looked at herself in the mirror. Pregnant, tired, still not sure what tomorrow held, but not afraid. Not anymore. She had lived in fear of being left behind for so long that she forgot what. It felt like to be matched in stride, even if the steps were small and slow. And while she still didn't know what Maddox truly wanted, she knew what she no longer needed. Proof. She already had her own. The city buzzed with spring energy. Trees lined the sidewalks with fresh green, and cafes spilled their seating onto patios. Delilah stood outside helping hands in a soft cotton dress, belly rounding beneath it, clipboard in hand. The non-profit was hosting its open house, a small event to bring in potential volunteers and local donors. She walked the perimeter slowly, speaking with community leaders, directing staff, and checking in on guests. Everything was in motion. Then Clarice tapped her shoulder. "You've got company." Delilah turned. Maddox stood near the back lot, not quite in the mix, not quite out of place. He wore a button-up, sleeves rolled, no tie, no flash, just clean and present. He had one hand tucked in his pocket and the other holding a small folder. Delilah nodded at Clarice and made her way over. "You came," she said. "I told you I would," he replied. "I brought something." "For the board?" He handed her the folder. Inside was a pledge letter, a donation to fund aftercare programs for young mothers transitioning out of shelters. No attention, no signature line fanfare. "This is generous," she said, closing it slowly. He shrugged. "It's needed." They stood quietly for a moment. Then Maddox spoke. "You look strong." Delilah raised an eyebrow. "I feel swollen." That made him smile. Swollen and strong. She rolled her eyes but smiled too. Before she could say more, a photographer walked over. "Can I get a picture of you two?" Delilah hesitated. Maddox glanced at her. "Only if you're okay with it." She nodded. They stood side by side, not touching, not posed. Just there. The flash clicked once, then again. And it hit her. There was no hiding anymore. This was her life now. Later that afternoon, she caught Maddox near the refreshment table. He was talking to one of the city council aides, answering questions about local economic gaps like someone who'd studied, not skimmed, community data. She watched quietly from across the room. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't leading with his bank account. He was present in the way that counted. She remembered that night in Charlotte. How he asked questions, how he'd listened. It wasn't just an act for donors. That was who he was. She just hadn't been ready to see it clearly. Not until now. After the event, they walked together down the sidewalk, away from the chatter and paper plates and music. "Where'd you learn to speak non-profit?" she asked. "I read the grant reports from your site," he said. "Then I asked your staff for the rest." Delilah glanced at him. "You're playing the long game?" "No," he said calmly. "I'm just not playing games at all." She looked forward again, hands folded over her belly. "Sometimes I forget what honesty feels like," she murmured. Maddox didn't respond immediately. Then he said, "You don't have to rush into trusting me, but I'm not going to stop showing up." They stopped at her apartment steps. "You want to come up?" she asked. He looked at her carefully. "Only if you mean it." "I do." Inside, she slipped off her flats and poured 2 glasses of water. No wine. No awkward tension. Just the soft sounds of city life outside the window. They sat at the kitchen table. She spoke first. "I was going to leave your name off the birth certificate." Maddox nodded slowly. "I wouldn't have blamed you, but now, I won't." His eyes met hers. "Thank you." She leaned back in the chair, rubbing her stomach gently. "I don't need you to play family, Maddox. I just need you to keep being who you are right now. Present, steady, clear. I can do that." "For her," Delilah said softly. "For both of you," he replied without hesitation. They talked for another hour, about books they grew up reading, foods they loved and hated, his dislike for raisins, her childhood fear of elevators, the safe, random spaces that had nothing to do with trauma or tension. Just 2 people remembering how to be human together. Before he left, he stood at the door for a beat. "If you need anything," he said, "call." She nodded. "I will." When the door closed behind him, she didn't feel the drop she used to. No dread, no second-guessing. He had seen her, in the fluorescent lights of a non-profit, in her living room in flats and a fading dress, and didn't flinch. And maybe that mattered more than any declaration ever could. 3 days passed before Delilah heard from Maddox again. Not a call, not a visit, just a message. "Picked up something for the baby's room. Left it by your door. No knock. Rest well." She opened the door later that afternoon and found a small, unmarked box. Inside was a hand-sewn crib blanket, cream-colored, with a subtle embroidered edge. No tags, no logos, just warmth. She ran her fingers along the stitching. Soft, clean, intentional. No grand gesture, no noise. It was the kind of thing someone gave when they weren't trying to impress you. They were simply thinking about what your child would need. She folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer next to the bassinet. Later that night, as she sat by the window with a glass of warm milk, she thought about the things Maddox hadn't said. He hadn't asked to move in. He hadn't talked about CO parenting plans. He hadn't asked what she wanted from him long term. But he had shown up, repeatedly, in simple, unshakable ways. And that mattered more than questions she wasn't ready to answer. At the non-profit the next morning, Clarice waved her into the office. Someone called, asked if you could speak next month at the Women's Equity Luncheon. Delilah blinked. "Me. They heard you at the fundraiser. Thought your story had weight." Delilah hesitated. "I'm not a public voice." Clarice shrugged. "You didn't think you were a mother either. And here you are." That made Delilah smirk. "I'll think about it," she said. That weekend, Maddox texted again. "Doctor's appointment this Thursday. Do I have clearance to tag along?" She replied, "Only if you bring snacks. I'm sick of clinic crackers." He responded with a laughing emoji and a gif of someone holding 10 granola bars. Thursday came, and so did Maddox, with a tote bag full of fruit cups, water bottles, and protein bars. Delilah tried not to smile too much when she saw it. At the clinic, he waited beside her, not glued to his phone like other partners in the waiting room. When her name was called, he stood up with her without a word. Inside the exam room, the doctor reviewed the baby's growth chart, then turned to Maddox. "You Dad?" He nodded once. "Yes." She smiled. "Well, she's doing great. Head down, heartbeat strong. You two are doing something right." Delilah didn't respond, but something swelled in her chest. Later, they stopped by a small cafe around the corner. Delilah ordered a turkey wrap. Maddox ordered lemon ginger tea. They sat outside under a patio umbrella as the wind tugged at the table menus. Delilah leaned back in her chair. "It's strange." "What is?" "You're here. Like, really here. But I still don't know what you want." Maddox looked at her evenly. "What I want? Yeah. Out of this. Out of us. Out of all this effort." He leaned forward, hands clasped. "I want to be the kind of man who doesn't walk away from what's mine. And I'm not talking about possession. I'm talking about responsibility." She raised a brow. "And the difference? Possession is selfish. Responsibility is sacred." She didn't speak for a moment, then nodded. Okay. That was the most she could offer, for now. Over the next few weeks, Maddox's presence became routine. He picked her up from appointments, dropped off groceries, fixed the squeaky cabinet under her sink, never overstepped, never assumed. Delilah didn't question the routine. It gave her space to breathe. But one evening, as they sat in the living room watching an old sitcom, he looked over at her belly and asked, "What will she call me?" Delilah paused. "I hadn't thought about it yet." Maddox nodded. "Not rushing, just wondering." "Let's see how you do with diaper changes first," she said. They both laughed. But in the quiet that followed, something unspoken passed between them. She didn't shut him out, and he didn't need more than that. As the days rolled on, Delilah's belly grew heavier, her steps slower. But her spirit, lighter, stronger. Because now, when she thought about the future, it didn't scare her. She wasn't building a dream with blind hope. She was building it with bricks, small ones, like a crib blanket, a tote bag of snacks, a man who waited instead of demanding, a man who saw her fully and never once looked away. Delilah stood at her living room window, watching the sun stretch across her quiet Raleigh Street. The bassinet sat in the corner now, fully assembled. Neutral colors, minimalist frame. She didn't want anything loud or overstated. There was a calm to the room, a calm she'd built. No one had handed it to her. No one had stepped in with a cape. But Maddox had brought steadiness, and that was harder to accept than she thought. She didn't tell him right away about the job offer. It came from a sister non-profit based in Durham. Part-time consulting, flexible hours, mostly virtual. Clarice had dropped her name in a casual conversation, and now they were sending over a contract. "Think of it as a post-baby restart," Clarice had said. Delilah hadn't said yes yet. She wanted it, but something in her hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. Everything she did now had ripple effects. Every choice impacted more than her. That same afternoon, Maddox texted, "I'm in the neighborhood. Feel like letting me do laundry again? I promise not to shrink your shirts this time." She replied, "If you mess up my towels, I'm billing you." He showed up 15 minutes later with detergent in one hand and bagels in the other. "You don't have to keep doing this," she told him. He gave her a look. "You didn't ask." "I offered." She took the bagels, shook her head, and moved aside. "Bathrooms free. Detergents in the cabinet. Don't worry," he said. "I brought my own." While the machine rumbled in the background, they sat across from each other on the couch. He took a bite of his bagel and asked, "You've been quiet. Something wrong?" "No, just thinking about—" She hesitated, then said, "There's a job offer, consulting. Starts a few weeks after delivery." Maddox nodded, chewing thoughtfully. "Do you want it?" "Yes." "Then take it." Delilah looked at him. "You're not going to tell me to slow down? I've watched you operate. Slowing down doesn't suit you. But if you say yes, I'll help make sure you don't drown in it." She sat back. "That's the thing. I'm not used to people offering help without control attached." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't need to control you to care about you." That sentence stayed in the air for a long time. Later that day, they went for a short walk. The sun was low, the sidewalks quiet. Delilah moved slowly. Maddox adjusted his pace to match hers without saying a word. They reached the corner of a small park, and she stopped. "I thought I'd be more afraid of this," she said softly. "Of what?" "Letting someone in." He looked at her profile. "You still are." She smiled faintly. "Maybe. But I'm learning the difference between someone who shows up to fix things and someone who shows up to stay." Maddox didn't speak. He just reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. She blinked. He didn't hand it to her. He said, "This is for a small office I just rented in downtown Raleigh. A satellite space for the non-profit fund I'm building." Delilah tilted her head. "I want you to design the first grant structure. The one for mothers re-entering the workforce." She folded her arms. "You want me to build it?" "You already live it," he said. She took the key, not as a gift, but as a challenge she was ready for. That evening, she opened the laptop Maddox had given her 3 weeks earlier. She told him she didn't want baby gifts. He'd said, "It's not for the baby, it's for you." Now, it had files, templates, her notes, her ideas. And for the first time she let herself imagine a future not just as a mom, but as a builder of something bigger. No strings, just strategy and support. 2 weeks passed. Delilah worked on the grant structure like it was personal, which it was. She reviewed existing models, added feedback from helping hands, and built a framework for young mothers who had limited resumes but unlimited resilience. Every line she typed felt like reclaiming power. Not just for herself, but for the women she'd served, stood beside, and sometimes cried with. Maddox didn't hover. He didn't comment unless she asked. But every few nights, he checked in. "Need snacks? A break? A sounding board?" She'd usually decline, then invite him over anyway. And so, a new rhythm formed. She worked. He visited. They existed. No labels. No pressure. Just presence. One afternoon, while sorting through supply donations at Helping Hands, Clarice pulled her aside. "You and Maddox," she said, folding her arms. "What are you doing?" Delilah didn't look up. "Existing." Clarice raised a brow. "That's a word. A deliberate one." Clarice softened. "I see how he looks at you." Delilah finally glanced up. "I know." Clarice studied her. "You scared of what it could be?" "I'm more scared of what I'll lose if I misread it." Clarice nodded, then placed a hand on her shoulder. "Just don't protect yourself so hard that you miss what's real." That night, Maddox dropped by with 2 paper bags. "Groceries?" "Nope," he said. "I remembered you said your mom used to make peach cobbler with cinnamon crust. I found a bakery on the south side that bakes from scratch." Delilah blinked. "You remembered that? You said it in passing." 3 weeks ago, she opened the bag and pulled out the still warm dish. She stared at it. He didn't reach for her, didn't make it romantic. He simply said, "You don't need to say anything. I just wanted to remind you that someone listens when you talk." Delilah sat down on the couch, tore off a piece with her fork, and took a bite. It was good, but the part that stuck with her was the listening. As the days shortened and her belly grew heavier, Maddox's role didn't expand, but it deepened. He went with her to prenatal yoga, waited outside the room with a flask of mint tea. He learned which side she preferred to sleep on, then offered pillows to support that when she napped on the couch. He never assumed. He asked. Always asked. And more often now, she found herself saying yes. One evening, rain hit the city hard. Delilah's power blinked out just after sunset. She texted Maddox without thinking. Outage. Everything's dark. I'm nearby. Want me to come? Yes. 20 minutes later, he arrived with a flashlight, 2 battery-powered, lanterns, and a small takeout bag from a Thai place down the road. She opened the door in a sweatshirt and fuzzy socks. You're ridiculous, she said. You're pregnant. And I like Pad See Ew. They ate by lantern light, cross-legged on the living room floor. After dinner, she leaned back against the wall and watched the flickering shadows. Do you ever think about the night we met? She asked. Every time I look at you. She paused. Would you change it? No, he said. But I'd have stayed. Delilah swallowed hard. Maddox set his drink down. I wasn't running. I was reckless. I thought leaving without a trace meant I'd be less of a disruption. You were wrong, she said. I know. Silence. Then she whispered. I waited. I hoped, even when I told myself not to. His voice dropped. And now? Now. I don't hope. I observe. That made him nod. That's fair. But he didn't look hurt. Just grounded. Later, when the power returned, Delilah walked Maddox to the door. He lingered for a beat, not waiting for permission. Just waiting. She stepped close, hand on the knob. If I let you in, past the visits and the errands, if I give you that. He didn't rush her. She met his eyes. Then I need to know you're not building a moment, you're building a life. I'm already doing that, he said. But only if you're building it with me. She didn't kiss him, not yet. But she didn't close the door either. The next morning she emailed the non-profit board with her finalized proposal. Title, Mother Forward under it, 1 line. Empower her future by never tying it to your conditions. Delilah sat back in her chair. Maddox hadn't written a word of it, but his presence had made every sentence possible. Have you ever been afraid to accept help because of what it might cost you emotionally? Share your thoughts below. Your voice might give someone else courage. Tap the like button, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe. Delilah hadn't seen Maddox in 3 days. It wasn't unusual. Their rhythm had always included space. But ever since the power outage and that quiet moment at the door, something had changed. Not loudly, not obviously, but deeply. She hadn't let him kiss her, but she hadn't walked away either. And now, that silence hummed between them like a question waiting to be asked. Friday morning, Delilah stood at the kitchen counter, peeling a mango with slow, precise movements. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. She was thinking about her due date. Less than 4 weeks away now. The nursery wasn't perfect. The drawers still needed organizing. A few shelves needed securing. But the space felt lived in, like it belonged to someone real, someone welcome. And for the first time in months, she felt okay with that. A knock came at the door. She wiped her hands and opened it slowly. Maddox stood there in a hoodie and jeans, holding a small brown box. Hey, he said. Didn't want to assume, so I came bearing pastries. She stepped aside. You think food forgives everything. It hasn't failed me yet. She smirked, closed the door, and motioned to the table. Sit down. I'll make tea. He unpacked the box. Croissant, a slice of banana bread, and a tiny square container of apple butter. You remembered the apple butter, she said. Wasn't hard. They ate in silence at first. Then Maddox said, I've been thinking about what you said, about not building moments. She met his gaze but didn't speak. I want a life with you, Delilah, not because of obligation, and not just because of her, but because I like who I am around you. Her eyes didn't soften, but her hands stopped moving. He added, that night we met, I'd just turned down a massive deal. Everyone thought I was crazy. I didn't care. But I felt hollow, like I was walking in shoes that didn't fit anymore. Delilah leaned back slightly, watching him. And then, he continued, I ended up in that motel room with someone who asked questions no one had ever asked me before. Like what? Like why I didn't smile when I talked about my wins, why I flinched at silence, why I looked like I hadn't slept in months. Delilah blinked. I don't remember asking all that. You didn't need to. It was in your eyes. The room felt heavier now, but not in a way that pushed her away, in a way that held something important. Maddox shifted slightly. I'm not asking for answers today, but I want you to know there's nothing you need to earn. You don't have to impress me, or prove anything. I'm already here. Delilah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. You always talk like you're giving a TED talk, she said. He laughed. You're not the first to say that. She stood and started clearing the plates. I'm going to ask you something, she said without turning around, and I need you to answer honestly. Okay. If I lost the baby tomorrow, if this entire picture disappeared, would you still come back here? He didn't blink. Yes. She faced him. Why? Because I already fell for you. Not for the idea of you or the title mother of my child. I like your laugh when you're tired. I like how you side-eye people when they brag. I like how you carry yourself like you built your own backbone. Delilah didn't respond. She just walked over, sat down again, and stared at him for a long time. Then said softly, Don't say those things unless you mean them. I mean every word. She nodded, but her voice was still guarded. We'll see. Later that evening, Maddox helped her sort baby supplies. He didn't ask questions, just folded clothes, labeled drawers, and took out the trash. At one point, Delilah sat down on the bed, rubbing her lower back. He looked up. Want me to grab the heating pad? She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. He moved quickly, plugged it in, then handed it over. She leaned back, groaning softly. You're dangerously close to being helpful. Let me know when I cross the line. You'll know. I'll throw something. He grinned and sat on the edge of the bed, watching her carefully. Tell me something you've never told anyone, he said quietly. Delilah narrowed her eyes. Why? Because I want to know who I'm fighting for. She thought for a second, then said, When I was 15, I spent 3 days alone after my mom was taken to the hospital. No one checked on me, not the neighbors, not family. I survived off peanut butter crackers and fear. Maddox's jaw tightened. I haven't forgotten that feeling, she said. That kind of silence leaves a mark. He leaned forward. I'll never leave you in that kind of silence again. She didn't answer, but she didn't tell him to stop either. Later, after he left, she stood alone in the nursery and looked around the room. Then she whispered out loud, If you mean it, keep showing me. And deep down, she knew he already was. Rain fell gently against the apartment windows the next morning. Delilah sat curled up on the couch, a soft blanket over her legs, one hand resting. On her belly, the other holding a pen above a half-filled journal page. She hadn't written much since Maddox's last visit, not because she didn't have words, but because the emotions were harder to untangle now. Things weren't simple. He was showing up. He was present, consistent, and that consistency scared her more than abandonment ever did. She knew what to do when people left. She had no blueprint for when they stayed. Her phone buzzed beside her. A message from Maddox. Want to meet me for lunch? Casual spot. No pressure. She stared at the text for a long second before typing. Sure, I'll meet you there. They met at a small cafe tucked into the corner of a quiet downtown street. Wood tables, soft lighting, rain-speckled windows. Maddox had already ordered tea by the time she walked in. When he saw her, he stood up. Delilah slid into the seat across from him, removing her coat slowly. You good? He asked. Yeah. Just tired. He nodded, waiting for her to settle in. The server brought over a grilled chicken sandwich for her, soup for him. They ate in silence for the first few minutes. Then Delilah spoke. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. Maddox looked up. She continued, about falling for me. Not the situation. He didn't interrupt. I believe you meant it, she said. But I need you to understand. I've built a life that functions without anyone else making decisions for me. I see that, and I need to be sure, really sure, that if I let this become more, it doesn't become a cage or a power shift. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. I'm not here to steer your ship. I just want to be allowed on board. Delilah held his gaze, then nodded slowly. You're getting there, she said. After lunch, they walked to the edge of the nearby community garden. It wasn't blooming yet. It was still early in the season, but the soil was rich and dark, and the air smelled clean. Maddox looked around. Feels like something's about to grow. Delilah glanced at him. Maybe that's the point. They walked slowly past the raised beds. Then he asked, What did you imagine love would look like before any of this? She smiled faintly. Someone who made me feel safe, without making me feel small. He nodded. That's a strong answer. What about you? I imagined I'd fall for someone polished, logical, predictable. He chuckled. Shows how much I knew. Delilah raised a brow. And what am I then? You're lightning wrapped in calm. She didn't respond, but the corner of her mouth lifted, just slightly. That night, back at home, Delilah stood in the baby's room, staring at the growing stack of essentials, burp cloths, bottles, tiny socks. Then she reached into the closet and pulled down the crib blanket Maddox had left weeks ago. She unfolded it and laid it flat across the mattress. Her hands smoothed the edges. Something inside her softened, and in that quiet moment, she let herself wonder, what if this wasn't temporary? What if this, him, them, wasn't a chapter but a whole book? 2 days later, Delilah invited Maddox over for dinner. It wasn't fancy. Rice, baked salmon, steamed vegetables, but it was intentional. She had set the table, lit a small candle, chosen her words ahead of time. When he arrived, he stepped inside, noticing the setup immediately. Should I be nervous? He asked. She smiled. No, just don't critique the food. They ate, laughed softly, kept it easy. But when they cleared the plates and sat back down, she looked at him seriously. I want to be clear about something. Maddox nodded. I'm not afraid of falling for you. I'm afraid of losing myself inside that fall. He didn't speak. She continued, so if this is going anywhere, really going somewhere, it has to include space for me to still be me. He reached for her hand, gently. I don't want to take anything from you, Delilah. I just want to make room. And in that moment, quiet, still, real, she let him hold her hand. Not as a symbol, but as a choice. The days moved slower now. Delilah's belly was full and round, and each step felt like carrying a small future with her. Sleep came in short stretches. Her ankles ached. Her lower back protested every time she bent down to grab something. But emotionally, she felt lighter than she had in months. Maddox had shown up. Not loudly, not perfectly, but consistently. No questions, no ultimatums, just presence. And presence, she was learning, was a form of love. They fell into a quiet pattern. He visited on Mondays and Thursdays. She cooked when she had the energy. He brought food when she didn't. Sometimes they talked late into the evening. Sometimes they just sat on the couch in silence. One night, he read aloud from a book she used to love as a girl. It was a simple chapter, something about a girl who wanted to grow her own garden, and his voice was calm, steady. Delilah lay on the couch, feet propped up, eyes closed. She wasn't asleep. She was listening to the words, to the moment, to the man who didn't need to be asked to care. One morning, after a prenatal yoga class, the instructor pulled Delilah aside. You seem centered, the woman said with a smile. A little tired, but steady. Delilah nodded. I've got help now. Good help. Partner. Delilah paused. Then said, kind of. The instructor nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Because it did. Whatever label Delilah and Maddox hadn't put on it, kind of was honest, and for now, that was enough. That afternoon, Maddox texted her. What's her name going to be? Have you decided? Delilah stared at the message. She hadn't told anyone yet, not even Clarice. She replied, Amani. A moment passed. Then, peace. Exactly. Later that evening, she invited him over. He brought pasta and garlic bread. They ate on the couch, plates in their laps, a comedy movie playing in the background. Halfway through the movie, Delilah reached for the remote and paused it. "I want to ask you something," she said, turning toward him. Maddox set his plate down. "Go ahead. If I wasn't pregnant, if none of this had happened, do you think we would have ever crossed paths again?" He didn't hesitate. "I would have found a way." She looked at him closely. "Why?" "Because you were the first person in a long time who saw me before asking for something." She stayed silent. He added, "You didn't know my name, my status, my company. You weren't trying to impress me. You just sat there and talked. Like I was real." "You were," she said. "Still are." She didn't say the last part, but he heard it anyway. After dinner, they cleaned the kitchen together. Maddox dried dishes. Delilah wiped counters. It was mundane, normal. But normal in this house felt holy. When they finished, she turned to him. "I want you in the delivery room." His eyes widened slightly. "Are you sure? I wouldn't ask if I wasn't." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll be there." She paused. "It's not because I expect anything from you after. It's just, I trust you." He didn't speak right away. Then he said, "That means more than anything else could." Later, she sat in the nursery, running her hand gently across the edge of the crib. The room was quiet. Outside, the streetlights buzzed. Inside, the only sound was her breath. But her heart felt loud, not in fear, in readiness. For once, life wasn't waiting to disappoint her. It was waiting to meet her where she stood. The following weekend, Delilah woke up earlier than usual. The sky was still pale, the air outside her window soft and grey. She stood in the kitchen, barefoot, making tea while rubbing her belly in slow circles. Amani kicked gently beneath her hand. It was almost time. Delilah had a checklist pinned to the fridge: hospital bag, ID, baby clothes, insurance papers. She checked it twice a day, even when nothing had changed. It wasn't about readiness. It was about control. And for a woman who had spent years doing everything alone, control had been her armor. Now, Maddox was here, still here, but the weight of that was different now. It didn't feel like dependency. It felt like room to breathe, room to hope, room to fall, if she wanted to. Later that afternoon, Clarice stopped by with a gift bag and a smile. "Thought I'd drop this off before everything gets hectic," she said, handing Delilah a soft purple bag tied with ribbon. Inside was a small framed quote, "You can't control when you bloom, but you can protect your roots." Delilah touched the frame gently. "Thank you." Clarice sat beside her on the couch, eyes warm. "You're glowing." "I'm exhausted." "That too," she laughed. After a beat, Clarice's voice lowered. "You ready to let him in all the way?" Delilah didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I think he's already in. I'm just catching up to it." Clarice smiled. "Then you're doing better than most." That evening, Maddox showed up with one small brown box. Delilah opened the door with a raised brow. "What now?" He held up the box. "Last thing, I promise." She stepped aside, smirking. Famous last words. Inside the box was a tiny white onesie with "Peace Begins," with her printed across the chest in soft grey lettering. Delilah's fingers stilled as she unfolded it. Maddox didn't speak. He didn't need to. She looked up at him slowly. "Where'd you get this?" "I had it made." Her voice dropped. "That wasn't necessary." "I know," he said. "That's why it mattered." They sat in the nursery that night, neither of them speaking for a while. Maddox rocked gently in the chair by the window. Delilah sat on the edge of the bed, watching her reflection in the mirror across the room. Her body had changed. Her life had shifted. But for once, she didn't feel like she was trying to hold everything together with one hand. She had help now. Not the kind that demanded thanks. The kind that stayed quiet, steady, and near. Around 10 p.m., her back started to ache more than usual. Not sharp, but deep, low, heavy. She didn't say anything at first, just shifted on the couch and rolled her neck. Maddox noticed. "You okay?" "I think so." He watched her closely. "Want me to stay?" "I'll be fine." He nodded, but didn't leave. At midnight, the first contraction hit. It wasn't a wave. It was a stab, quick and real. Delilah sat up, her breath catching. "Okay." That felt different. Maddox stood. "We going in?" She looked at him, pale but calm. "I think so." He reached for her bag by the door. Cars gassed up. "I'll drive." She took his hand without thinking. And that's how they left the apartment, together. No panic, no confusion. Just a quiet, shared breath between them, and the moment that would change their lives forever. The drive to the hospital was silent, but not tense. Maddox kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly near Delilah's on the center console. Every few seconds he glanced over to check on her. She breathed through the pain, eyes half closed, one hand pressed against her stomach. "No speeding," she whispered. "We're not in a movie." He gave a soft laugh. "Right, real life. Got it." The hospital was already quiet when they pulled in. Midnight had tipped into morning. Maddox parked near the ER entrance and rushed around to her side. Delilah grunted through another contraction, gripping the doorframe. "I got you," he said, steadying her with both arms. Inside, nurses moved swiftly. Paperwork was light. Delilah's name was already in the system. She'd registered weeks ago, just in case. Maddox handled the check-in while she was wheeled upstairs to labor and delivery. By the time he joined her, she was in a gown, hooked up to monitors. The soft, rhythmic beat of the baby's heart echoed from the machine in the corner. Delilah looked up at him. "Still time to run." He pulled the chair close. "I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, said nothing more. The room dimmed to a soft yellow as nurses stepped out. The machines beeped quietly. Outside, the city slept. Inside, Delilah fought to stay calm through the rising pain. Hours passed. Contractions came faster, sharper. Delilah leaned forward, gripping the sides of the bed. Maddox stood behind her, rubbing her lower back gently, whispering, "You're doing amazing. You're strong." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She breathed, focused, determined not to lose herself to the pain. At one point, she looked up at him, sweat beading at her temples. "I can't believe you're seeing me like this." "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," he said simply. She blinked at him, lips parting, then closed her eyes as another wave hit. By sunrise, she was fully dilated. The room filled with nurses, a soft buzz of motion and purpose. Delilah gripped the bedrail. Maddox stood on her left side, masked, gloved, but his eyes never left her face. "Almost there," the nurse said. "On your next push." Delilah bore down, crying out. Maddox tightened his grip on her hand. "Push. Breathe. You've got this." Another contraction, another cry, and then a sound filled the room, not from her, from the child. A sharp, piercing wail. A girl. The doctor lifted her up, pink, alive, and furious at the world. Delilah sobbed. "Is she—" "She's perfect," the doctor said. They laid the baby on her chest. Maddox stood frozen for a second, watching the way Delilah clutched their daughter like she was the only thing in the world that made sense. "She has your eyes," Delilah whispered. Maddox wiped at his own eyes. "And your strength." Later, the room calmed. Lights lowered. Nurses slipped away. Delilah lay resting, baby swaddled beside her. Maddox sat nearby, his hand resting on the edge of the bassinet. They hadn't spoken in minutes, but the silence was full of something tender. Finally, Delilah whispered, "What now?" He met her gaze. "We raise her, together, if you'll let me." Delilah didn't reply. Not yet. Because some answers don't come in words. Some come in how your hand doesn't pull away when someone reaches for it. Delilah stayed in the hospital for 2 days. Nurses came in and out with smiles and soft encouragements. Vital signs were checked. Diaper tutorials were given. Swaddling lessons repeated. Maddox didn't leave her side, not once. He slept in the recliner, one eye always on Delilah, the other on Amani. He changed the first diaper, with a bit of struggle, and whispered to the baby as if she could already understand him. "You came early," he said softly to her one morning, holding her in the crook of his arm. "But you're right on time." Delilah watched from the bed. Quiet. She wasn't used to this, being cared for, having someone present, attentive. By the end of the second day, she was cleared for discharge. A nurse wheeled her out. Maddox walked beside her with the diaper bag slung over his shoulder and the car seat carefully balanced in one hand. Outside, the air was brisk. A black SUV waited by the curb. Delilah raised an eyebrow. "Is that yours?" He nodded. "Figures." He opened the door, helped her in gently, then buckled Amani's seat in place, with all the precision of a man used to checking contracts, not car seats. As they pulled away from the hospital, the quiet felt different, not awkward, but filled with the weight of everything ahead. Back at Delilah's apartment, Maddox hesitated at the door. "Are you sure you want me to come in?" She looked at him, then nodded. Inside, he followed her in, carrying Amani in her carrier. He looked around, the small kitchen, the couch with worn cushions, the tiny hallway that led to a single bedroom. It wasn't luxury, but it was warm, lived in, real. Delilah placed Amani in the crib set up beside her bed, then turned to Maddox. "You want to hold her?" He nodded. She picked Amani up and placed her carefully into his arms. She was so small, so light, and yet Maddox felt like he was holding the entire weight of his future. "She's perfect," he said again. Delilah folded her arms, watching him. "I still don't know what you want from us." Maddox met her eyes. "Not control, not to take her away. I want to be in her life, and yours. But I'm not forcing anything." Delilah looked at him for a long moment. "You said something before," she murmured. "In the hospital, about trying. For real, I meant it. You're not used to this." "No," he said, "but I want to learn. I want to earn it." Over the next weeks, Maddox came by often. Not as a billionaire. Not with gifts or money. He came with groceries, with takeout, with diapers when she ran out. He cleaned dishes without being asked, changed diapers without complaint. Delilah stayed guarded, but slowly the wall cracked. Not because of big speeches, because he showed up, again and again. One night, Delilah stepped into the living room to find Maddox asleep on the couch. Amani lay on his chest, rising and falling with his breath. She paused at the doorway, watching them, and something shifted in her chest. Not fear, not doubt, something warmer. She hadn't asked for this, but it was here. And maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let it stay. One Friday, Maddox brought something different, a small envelope. Delilah raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" He handed it to her. A lease agreement, for a bigger place, closer to the park, better light, 2 bedrooms. She froze. "You're trying to move us?" "No," he said gently. "I'm offering you the option. You're on the lease. Not me, no strings, just safety, space, comfort. If you say no, I'll respect that." Delilah looked down at the papers, then up at him. "This isn't about control. It's about care." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't tear it up either. Weeks later, she stood by the window in their new apartment, sunlight streaming in, Amani asleep in the bassinet. Maddox stood behind her. Delilah leaned back against his chest. "You did all this," she whispered. "For us." He wrapped his arms around her. "No, with you. That's all I want, to do this with you." She looked up at him, and for the first time since that one night in Charlotte, she let herself believe, not in fairy tales, not in promises, but in this moment, in this man, in this love that came softly, steadily, and stayed. Delilah stood in the kitchen, barefoot, with her sleeves rolled up. The scent of lemon and garlic filled the air. She stirred the pot slowly, her mind somewhere between calm and disbelief. Life had changed, and not just because of Amani. The apartment was brighter, bigger, but what stunned her most wasn't the space or the furniture, it was the peace. No clutter, no weight dragging her down, no tight budget ticking like a bomb. Behind her, Maddox came in from the balcony. He was barefoot too, in grey sweatpants and a simple white tee. He walked differently these days, less like a CEO, more like a man who had something to lose and something to protect. He leaned against the counter. "Smells amazing. Don't distract me," she warned without turning. He laughed softly. "I wouldn't dare." But she knew he would. He always did. Not with drama, with presence, with small moments that made her smile when she didn't mean to. Like now. She finally turned to him. Maddox had a look she'd come to recognize, one he reserved for just her. Quiet, open, a kind of reverence that made her want to cry sometimes. "How's Amani?" she asked. "Napping." "Like a queen." Delilah nodded, then turned the stove off. "Dinner in 20, she said, stepping past him. But he caught her wrist gently. "Hold on." She looked back. Maddox's voice softened. "Sit with me." She hesitated. "Now?" "Yeah. Please." She followed him to the couch. The baby monitor sat nearby, soft static humming. The city lights blinked through the windows, and for a moment, the world felt still. Maddox faced her fully. "I've been thinking," he began, "about how we got here." Delilah didn't interrupt. "You didn't ask for me to show up. You didn't chase me. And still, you gave me a chance to be part of something I didn't even know I wanted." He paused, then continued. "I always thought love had to be earned through grand gestures, big moves, power plays, a breath. But you showed me something else. You let me see that love doesn't shout. Sometimes it whispers, it grows." Delilah stared at him, heart thudding. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box. Her breath hitched. "I don't want to rush you," he said, "but I want to be clear. I'm here. I want you. Not because of Amani, not because I'm trying to do the right thing." He opened the box. A ring sat inside, simple, gold, timeless. "I want to build a life, with you, for real, for always." Delilah didn't move. She blinked fast, lips parted. "I know this doesn't erase the beginning," he added, "but I'm not going anywhere, even if you say no." She stared at the ring, then looked at him. "I didn't think I'd ever believe a man again," she whispered. "Not after everything." "I know. But you didn't just show up once, you stayed. That changed everything." Her eyes welled. She took the box, closed it, then leaned in and kissed him. Soft, intentional. When she pulled back, her voice was clear. "I'm not saying yes yet." Maddox nodded, calm. "That's okay. But I'm not saying no." He smiled. "I'll wait." She held his gaze. "I won't make you wait long." He exhaled. "That's all I need." Delilah leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat there in silence, and for the first time in a long time, there were no more walls. The sun filtered through the sheer curtains the next morning. Delilah woke slowly, her body curled under the soft cotton sheets. Amani's baby monitor blinked quietly beside her, but there was no sound, just the gentle rhythm of a home that had found its calm. She rolled over to find Maddox still asleep, one arm stretched across the pillow where she had been. His breathing was steady, lips slightly parted, hair tousled. She watched him for a moment. Not the billionaire, not the man from the hotel room, just a man. Hers, maybe. She got up quietly and went to the kitchen, barefoot, hoodie on. As the coffee brewed, she stared at the ring box on the counter. She hadn't opened it again. She didn't need to. Not yet. It wasn't about the ring. It was about the life. He had shown her he could be patient, could listen, could unlearn the ways power had taught him to take control. Delilah sipped her coffee and opened her phone. A text from her boss came in. "We got the grant. Enough to expand. We're going to be able to help more women. This changes everything." She smiled to herself. It was happening. Her life wasn't waiting anymore. It was unfolding. Behind her, Maddox walked in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He reached for a mug and poured his own coffee. "Morning," he said, voice thick with sleep. "Morning." He leaned against the counter, looking at her over the rim of his cup. "You okay?" She nodded. Then said, "I've been thinking." His brow lifted. "I don't want a fancy wedding," she said, "or a headline, or a press release. You won't get one. I want a backyard, a few people I trust, and a dress I can dance in. You'll get that. I want to wake up and still feel like me, not some version you molded to fit your life." He nodded slowly. "You'd never be anyone but you." Delilah took another sip, then placed her mug down, turned, and walked to the bedroom. She returned holding the small velvet box. She didn't say anything. She placed it on the counter between them, opened it, then slid the ring onto her finger, herself. Maddox's lips parted, but he didn't speak. She reached for his hand and laced their fingers. "I don't want a savior," she whispered. "I want a partner. That's all I ever wanted to be. And if you ever stop listening, I won't. I'll remind you." He stepped forward and kissed her forehead. That night, they sat on the balcony while Amani slept. The city below blinked and breathed, unaware of the promise made above it. A woman who never asked for a fairy tale, a man who finally stopped running from real love, and a little girl who'd never know what it felt like to be unloved. Because sometimes one night, in one bed, is all it takes to begin again. If this story moved you, imagine how many others it could touch too. Like the video to show your support, comment your favorite moment. Was it the hotel scene, the comeback, or the ending? Share this story with someone who believes love comes when you least expect it, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, real-life love stories. Every share helps this channel grow and brings more stories of strength, healing, and second chances to your screen. You've watched her journey. Now it's your turn. What would you do if one night changed your whole life?